For the past 40 years, Robert Altman has made films that defy convention, bringing together impressive ensembles of actors. Listen to this: MASH, Nashville, Shortcuts, and The Player. In his latest, Gosford Park, he brings together arguably one of the greatest group of actors ever assembled. They include Maggie Smith, Michael Gambon, Derek Jacobi, Helen Mirren, Alan Bates, Christian Scott Thomas, Emily Watson, and Bob Balaban, and Clive Owen, just to name a few. Roger Ebert calls this film a joyous, audacious achievement, saying at a time when too many movies focus every scene on a $20 million star, this Altman film is like a party with no boring guest. Having said that, here is the trailer from the film.
Alan Bates, Stephen Fry, Michael Gambon, Derek Jacobi, Kelly MacDonald, Helen Mirren, Jeremy Northam, Clive Owen, Ryan Phillippe, Kristen Scott Thomas, Maggie Smith, Emily Watson.
Tough luck on whoever's got any secrets to hide.
Oh, how horrid.
Gosford Park.
Perhaps the butler did it.
I am pleased to welcome director Robert Altman and screenwriter Julian Fellowes to this broadcast to talk about this movie, which many people are talking about and praising. However, Mr. Altman, when I asked him, was this his great work and did he love this, he said, of course I do, because he feels that way about all his films. Tell me where this started.
This started with my co-producer, Bob Balaban.
Right.
Bob is a kind of a Renaissance man. He's an actor, director, entrepreneur. He does everything. Right. And I've known him for many, many years. And I don't even know where this was, but we were talking, and he said, is there anything our companies could do together? I'd love to develop some property with you. And I said, well, I've never done a whodunit. And I said, I'm always kind of interested in going into a genre that I haven't been in before. And if I could think of, he said, what do you mean by whodunit? I said, you know, 10 Little Indians, Agatha Christie, the Big Country House, all the people invited, and then
somebody knocked off,
and all that. And it grew like that. And he talked about it, and he went through all the Agatha Christie stuff that wasn't done, hadn't been done, and nothing seemed different from the other. And I said, well, let's just get a writer and go on this thing. And he said, well, I know, I think he had been doing something with you, hadn't he?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we'd worked.
Pick up the story, Julian.
Yeah. Well, this was an extraordinary moment in my life. I mean, I had this telephone call in the kitchen at home, and Bob Balaban said, would you be interested in writing a film for Robert Altman?
Yeah. Are there cows in Texas?
And then we had this extraordinary three-way telephone call with Bob in Texas when you're doing Dr. T and Balaban in New York and me in London, and it was a terrible connection. Yeah. And every time they said, well, I feel like this, and I kept thinking, I can't really say, can we redial this, because it sounded so pathetic. So I kept trying to kind of wing my way through this conversation, but it ended up with the invitation to put down some ideas about characters and stories and this sort of thing, because Bob, I think this is right, felt that, he's always very interested in situations where people are leading completely different lives in very close physical proximity, and also that this film was not going to be a whodunit, really. It was going to be a kind of examination of the interclass relationships at the end of that world, pretending to be a whodunit.
Right. And because you pretty early figure out.
Well, you either do it, people either figure out or they come out and they said, I have no idea who did this. But it doesn't make I don't call it a whodunit so much as I call it a who cares who done it.
Who cares who did it?
Yeah.
But you've often said that what your movie is about characters. Yeah. That you're much more interested in character than plot.
Yeah, there's only, how many plots? 6, they say?
6, yeah.
There's 25 in this movie, but there's only 6 in the world.
But a plot doesn't, how it comes out doesn't interest me so much as how it goes in.
Well, tell me how you got all these. I mean, you really put together an ensemble, and this is not one of those big budget pictures.
Oh, good God. No, let me tell you, I was going to wear a tie, except I had to sell my tie during the production.
No, you're not getting with that. I've never seen you without a sweater.
But we just started from, I went to England, And we had the first draft of. I didn't think this was going to work. And when we hired Julian, I thought, well, okay, we'll get something, but it's going to be another one of those standard things. 'Cause I didn't know him.
A standard thing means you come up with an idea and you sort of put it together and you can't get the financing.
And it looks like everything else.
Right.
And but we got his first draft back, and I had not met Julian yet. And so then we brought him over to California, and we talked for 3 or 4 days, and we kind of exchanged ideas. And I thought, this is really good, this piece. Yeah. So I just committed to it. And I went to England, and I just started seeing actors. I got several of them were friends of mine. I mean, social friends.
Like, who was the first?
The first person that I signed on was Kelly MacDonald.
Yeah.
Who's fabulous in the film.
The played Mary, the maid.
Right.
She's really the tour guide in the film. She's the one that leads us through it. Mm-hmm. Then I think Maggie
Smith came on?
She responded like that.
Now, you're not telling them, look, this is a little bit part. You're saying you're here for the duration, folks.
Oh, absolutely.
This is not a cameo.
No, nobody worked less than 6 weeks, I don't think, 7 weeks.
Well, and Alan Bates was on it for about 4 weeks before he said anything.
Alan Bates, this is why this film couldn't have been made in America with American actors. Alan Bates came to work, I would say, an average of 4 days a week for 7 weeks, got in his butler suit, stood there way in the background, and didn't have a line other than yes sir, no sir, until we moved upstairs. And it was just great.
Now, we ought to say, Julian, you probably wrote it, you wrote it this way, this is seen from the servant's perspective.
Well, we decided very early on that. I mean, that was Bob's principle, really, that the servants would guide us through this story. And we have this convention, which I think probably a lot of people don't notice, which is that you never see an upstairs character except when there's a servant in the room.
So if the servant leaves the room,
so does the camera.
Right.
And, of course, you see the servants without upstairs people all the way through the movie. Right. So in that way, it does give them a kind of bias. But I think what was more than that, really, was that Bob was determined that there shouldn't be that kind of automatic division in your mind. You know, when you see, I wouldn't say a Merchant Ivory film because they're all wonderful, but I mean, you know, whatever. You assume that the upstairs people are the characters you're going to watch.
Exactly.
And the downstairs ones come in and say the carriage is waiting or whatever.
Right.
They're kind of talking extras. And we really wanted this to just be a group of people who were interacting. And some of them were servants and some of them were not. And of course, it's equally cast. You know, there are as many stars downstairs as there are up. But I must just say...
Emily Watson is a maid.
I mean, Alan Bates is a butler, and Richard E. Grant is a footman, you know, and all of that. And Eileen Atkins is a cook. But one of the extraordinary things about getting it going, which the most extraordinary part of working on an Altman picture is that normally when you're working on something, there are these kind of hiati and is it going to happen, and everything goes to sleep for 6 weeks, and they say, oh, they're very excited about it at Universal or something, and nothing is happening. And when you get on board a Robert Altman picture, from the day one, this movie's happening.
Right.
And there's a day...
Now, what do you mean by that, this movie's happening?
Really, from the first conversation in January, this was a film that was going to happen. I was writing this film. Now, I don't know how much Bob believed that, but I believed it. And there was never a gap. I mean, literally, I started writing. I flew to Hollywood in July or something or other. Bob flew to London in September. We had another session on his way to Venice. He moved to London in November. We started shooting in March. There just was never a pause. And that was extraordinary. And, of course, people would come up to you and say, oh, this is a fantastic break. This is incredible. My God, this is incredible. And, of course, you would know that half of it wasn't in place at that time. But you thought, well, I can't say that because it's like being kind of letting the side down. So you'd say, it's pretty good, isn't it? You know. But it was extraordinary, that. I've never known anyone else to be able to bring that off, really. So that was kind of
very exciting. You just don't take any money for it. And well, you keep really under there. There's some kind of a cap. I don't know quite what it is, but if they know that you're not making a profit, they'll go ahead with it.
Yeah, all right. Now, didn't you get some money from the British? I mean, from the government over there, some deal where they
we
give
got
you money.
About $2 million or three.
Well, what was extraordinary?
$3 million from the gambling fund.
From the lotteries,
the lottery money. So, what, they finance movies from the lottery?
Yes.
They certainly do. And normally they have a reputation of financing terrible movies that nobody wants to go and see. Yes. So we hope we've broken the trend here.
All right. Now, one last thing. Everybody is mic'd.
Yes.
And you say to them, even if you don't have something, if you say something, it'll be recorded.
Yes.
So if you're the performer, then Julie and I are saying, It might be recorded somewhere.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that nobody knows. I shot this mostly with 2 cameras going all the time. And they were always moving kind of arbitrarily, just like ghostly around the room, not following anybody, but just moving. So I wanted the audience to feel that
they're in the room,
that they had to move their necks,
right?
That they had to go this way or that way.
Yeah.
And it was I felt it was very important because I did not want it to feel with most of these period films you see, they become so beautiful and they become so precise and they're so well staged that they take on a storybook false quality. Right. And I wanted to just simply to be sloppy.
See, I'm so interested in this, having seen your film and seeing other directors do this in a different way. If I could, I would have a track around this entire set, along the black curtains, and it would be a camera, and the cameras would be constantly moving, and a director would sit there and punch.
That's right.
So they wouldn't be stationary, and you would sense a sense of movement. So it may catch you talking from your
That's right.
side.
And what it also does, it makes you, in a theater seat, it makes you move, feel like you have to move your body.
Right. But it creates this extraordinary sense of reality.
Right.
Because, as Kristen said, I think, on something, she said, you come on with your obligation of the lines because you're advancing all these 5 million stories by 1 word at a time.
Right.
But then that's not where the scene ends. And so what happens is that even when, maybe the improvised stuff doesn't play a part in the scene, but the dialogue is resting on a pillow of reality. Right. Because there is this kind of murmur of real life going on all the time underneath. And that is what most directors cannot achieve. You never feel in this film, I think, that you're watching actors speak a scene. You're watching real people live this life.
Yeah, but Julian, I don't think that I think that's wrong to say. The system isn't done that way. And most directors who are working for producers or studios, and somebody's going to no, we have to do it this way. Yeah. Don't fool around. We want this way.
Right.
And so you feel, okay, I have to do it in a conventional manner. And
because also the actors are never off. Exactly what you're saying. Yeah. There's never a moment when you say, "Oh, this is Maggie's shot."
Well, they never knew. They never knew whether the camera was on them or not.
Never knew.
No.
And so you told them, assume the camera may be on you.
It could be. And another thing is, instead of going like in a scene with 6 people, and the key line is, loved her, I hated her. Yeah. Rebecca. And when that happened in the same way, suddenly you're on a big close-up of Laurence Olivier, and he says, loved her, I hated her. In this film, he might have been saying that going out the door, and it would be on his back. In other words, we didn't cut to the close-up to serve the audience. And by doing that, I think, I wanted to put the audience on notice very early that if you don't pay attention, go home, because you're not going to get it.
All right.
You're going to miss it.
Let's see. We've talked enough about this. Let's take a look. This is on the way to a shooting party in which Ivor Novello, played by Jeremy Northam, introduces Morris Weissman, played by Bob Balaban, to Constance, played by Maggie Smith. Here 'tis.
Well, if everything seems to be all right. Hi!
Could we get on before I freeze to death?
Is that really Ivor Novello?
Yes, could we get on?
This is one of the best things you've done in a while.
Oh, I think so.
It really is.
Yeah, I really do. And I don't...
When did you realize that? I mean, like day 2 or day 28?
I call it getting inside the bubble. And once I get into the thing, I'm committed to that. And that's all the world that I exist in is in there. And I, of course, think everything is going to work perfectly.
But there was a moment after you'd edited the first cut. I remember when you rang me, we were talking for something, and Bob said, do you know, I think we may have lightning in a bottle here.
Exactly. That's...
And...
That first cut, rough cut.
Yeah.
That was the moment where I suddenly thought, wow.
Yeah. Which makes me think that, I mean, filmmaking, you never know. I mean, it means that it's a difference between art and science.
It's just that slim hair's difference. It makes the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't think you can plan it or put your finger on it. I do know that it happens. The best chance of the lightning in the bottle is if the actors, what they give beyond, because they're taking two-dimensional. The script is two-dimensional.
Yeah, but you know what you say too? You say this, and Julian, you would know this too. You say that the biggest job you have is casting.
That's right.
If you got a good script and you cast well, you know, Mr. Altman can sort of sit back and have fun.
Julian was on the set every day, except I think the last 4 days when we were up in the attic stuff, and he had to go be knighted or something, and he was an associate producer on the thing and was there and didn't get paid for it, I might add. But I've never.
So we both made our sacrifices.
Yes. But to have a writer committed there, then when these things come up, we want to change, or look at this. Wouldn't this lead us in a great place? Then Julian was in his, I don't know where he was, in some little trailer or something. He'd come back out and he said, hey, what about this? And there would be this.
And the actors would look at it and say, yeah.
But I think the most extraordinary part of all this is what Bob has with actor, apart from the fact that he really likes them. I mean, all directors pretend to like them, but most of them can't stand them. He really likes them, and he's really interested in what they have to say and do. But also, he wants to be surprised. And as an actor, I can tell you that most of the time, what the director wants you to do is roughly what he has already imagined in his head. And you are struggling to get to the performance he has already imagined. That is not true of Bob. He wants to be surprised. Yeah. He wants these actors to open up and do something with the characters which he hadn't thought of, I hadn't thought of. They take them off in some other direction. And of course, when you are encouraged to do that, and when you're made to feel that you are intelligent and creative and that your talent is going to be useful to this film, naturally enough, you do very good work.
Here is one last clip from the movie. Lady Sylvia, played by Kristen Scott Thomas, introduces Inspector Thompson, played by Stephen Fry, to the rest of the servants. Here it is.
Charlie Chan is in London. He's not in California. Well, I mean, they're talking about rewrites about the part of the Cockney maid, and she's running in and saying all these things. Look, I'm here. They don't talk. The butlers and the maids, they stand. They watch. I mean, you know, they serve. They do things. What about Claudette Colbert? Isn't she's British, isn't she? She sounds British. Is she, like, affected, or is she British?
That's an example of the point where you talk about when they go out of the room.
Yeah.
You know, when the servant goes out of the room, then you're out of the room.
You're out of the room.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here and to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you on the broadcast.